Ang i-report po namin ay categorical imperative and literalism. At ako po si Frost A. Malapitan ang mag-introduction ng topic na iuulat namin. Introduction. The categorical imperative in ethics of 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant, the founder of critical philosophy, a moral law that is unconditional or absolute for all agents, the validity or claim of which does not depend on any ulterior motive or end. Thou shalt not steal, for example, is a categorical as distinct from the hypothetical imperative, associated with desire such as do not steal if you want to be popular. For Kant, there was only one such categorical imperative, which you can at the same time will that is should become a universal law, is a purely formal or logical statement and expresses the conditional of rationality of conduct rather than that of its morality, which is expressed in another Kantian formula. So act to treat humanity, whether in your own personal on another, always as an end, and never only a means. Categorical imperative. The categorical imperative was devised by Immanuel Kant to provide a set requirements a maxim or motivation must pass in order for the action to be considered a moral obligation. When a categorical imperative is established, it becomes one moral's duty to carry out the action under any circumstances. When carrying out this action, the individual's primary motive should always be duty according to Kant. This is because we decipher us from animal and so, logically, must be part of being a moral agent. Reason is objective and universal for humanity, and so is a reliable and reasonable basis for a moral theory. Kant characterized the categorical imperative as an objective, rationally necessary and unconditionally principle that we must always follow despite any natural or inclinations we may have to the contrary. All specific moral requirements according to Kant are satisfied by this principle, which means that all immoral actions are irrational because they are violate the categorical imperative will must be regarded as autonomous or free in the sense of being author of the law that binds it. The fundamental principle of morality, the CI, is none other than the law of an autonomous will. Patton, 1947. Kant argued that conformity to the CI a non-instrumental principle, and hence two moral requirements themselves can nevertheless be shown to be essential to rational agency. This argument was based on his striking doctrine that a rational utility after which the doctrine is named is a measure in economics of the relative satisfaction from or desirability of the consumption of goods. Utilitarianism can thus describe as a quantitative and reductionist approach to ethics. Will must be regarded as autonomous or free in the sense of being the author of the law that binds it. The fundamental principle of morality, the CI, is an is none other than the law of an autonomous will, Patton, 1947. The categorical imperative is determined by referring to three formulations, namely, number 1, formula of the law of nature insists that we should act only according to the maxim, which could we be universalized. This means that we must be able to universalize a principle without contradictions. This is not possible. We can logically assume that the act is immoral as it is counter the reason. If a rule is not universalized, then other will not be free to act from the same moral principles, and Kant strongly believed that autonomy and freedom were essential to being a moral agent. Number 2. The formula of end in itself ensures that you will never treat other or oneself merely as means, but always as an end. To use someone merely as an to some other end is to exploit the rationality, and we should value everyone as rational being. Number 3. Formula of a kingdom of ends asks for us to act as if a legislative member in the universal kingdom of ends. The kingdom of ends is a world in which everyone acts from categorical imperative. And although we may not live in this world, we must act if we are. According to the formula, we must act on the assumption that everyone will follow the rule you make through your action. If intended action passes each of the formulation, it is a categorical imperative and thus not only right but moral obligations. Kant holds the fundamental principle of our moral duty is a categorical imperative. Is an imperative because it is an command addressed to the agents who could not follow it but might not. It is a categorical in virtue of applying to us unconditionally or simply because we possess a rational wills without reference to any end that we might or we might not have. It does not, in other words, apply to us on conditional that we must have antecipently adopted some goals for ourselves. Kant described the will as an operating on the basis of subjective volitional principle he calls maxim. Hence morality and other rational requirements are, for the most part, demands that apply to the maxim that we act on.
Hello, I'm Joshua M. Tiga from BSIT2F Electronics, and I'm here to discuss on utilitarianism. Utilitarianism thought the first systematic account of utilitarianism was developed by Jeremy Bentham. The core insight motivating the tree occurred much earlier. That insight is that morally appropriate behavior will not harm others, but instead increase happiness or utility. What is distinctive about utilitarianism is its approach in taking that insight and developing an account of moral evaluation and moral direction that expands on it. Early precursors to the classic utilitarian includes the British moralists Cumberland's, Shaftesbury, Hutcheson, Gay, and Hume. Of there, Francis Hutcheson from 1694 to 1746 is explicitly utilitarian. when it comes to action choice. SCAR 1996. My other groupmates will discuss more of them later. Some earliest utilitarian thinkers were the theological utilitarians such as Richard Cumberland from 1631 to 1718 and John Gay from 1699 to 1745. They believed that promoting human happiness was incumbent on us since it was approved by God. This means that they said that it is a necessity for us to promote human happiness because it is agreed upon by God. On first sight, utilitarianism is a very good moral theory because it centers focus on the happiness of everyone. And I believe if we were to apply utilitarianism to our actions, it could be of great benefit to us all because we will be happy, and also it it doesn't promote or it opposes actions that cause harm or unhappiness. It says here that in utilitarianism, an act is morally correct if it resulted in the greatest happiness for the highest number, or it's or an act is morally correct if it resulted in the least unhappiness for the least number. This is good, yeah. On paper, this is good because it promotes happiness and opposes harm and unhappiness. But it doesn't account for other elements in our life, such as love. Love brings great values to us, but it also brings heartaches. Or for a simple example, if we choose what to eat, eating unhealthy gives us the greatest happiness, but eating unhealthy is a necessity for us to live a longer life. That's the thing about utilitarianism. It's a good theory, it's a good moral theory, but it lacks other elements that have great value in our lives. And that's it for me. Thank you, and off to the next reporter.
Ako po si Frost ay Malapitan at ang iuulat ko po ay kay John Gay. Gay, 1731, he held that since God wants the happiness of mankind, and since God's will give us the criterion of virtue, the happiness of mankind may not be said to be criterion of virtue, but once removed. This view was combined with a view of human motivation with egoistic elements, a person's individual salvation, her eternal happiness dependent on conformity to God's will, as did virtue itself, promoting human happiness and one's own consistent, but given God's design, it was not accidental con- coincidence. Gay's influence on later writers such as Hume, mamaya po yung report ng susunod na reporter, deserves notes. It is Gay's essay that some of the questions that concern Hume's on the nature of virtue are addressed. For example, Gay was curious about how to explain our practice of approbations and disprobations of actions and characters. When we see an action that is virtuous, we disapprove of it. Further, we associate certain things with their effects so that We form positive association and negative association that we underwrite our moral judgments.
Good afternoon. My name is Aginil Esperas. My report is about Anthony Ashley Cooper, 3rd Earl of Shaftesbury. Ito yung tinuturing na isang pinakaunang teorya ng moral sense na naniniwala na nagtataglay tayo ng isang uri which is yung inner eye. Yung inner eye, ito yung nagpapahintulot sa atin na gumawa ng moral ng diskriminasyon. Ito rin daw yung isang likas na kahulugan ng tama at mali. May isang taong interesado katulad ni Anthony Ashley Cooper na si Francis Hutcheson. Gusto rin niyang magsuri. Pinagtibay niya ang moral sense approach. Sa kanyang pagsusulat, nakikita rin natin ang kahalagahan ng moral na deliberasyon sa pagpili ng aksyon. Next one is the classical utilitarians. Ito ay isang pagnanais na makita ang walang silbi, tiwala sa batas at mga gawi sa lipunan. Sa pagpapatupad ng layuning ito, nangangailangan ng isang normative ethical theory employed as a critical tools. Sa pagbuo ng teorya, doon nabubuo yung pananaw tungkol sa kung ano ang mali sa kanilang lipunan. Halimbawa nito, ilang batas ay masama ang nagiging resulta. Para kay Jeremy Bentham, ang naging masama sa kanila ay kawalan ng silbi kaya humantong sa kalungkutan at paghihirap.
Good afternoon. I'm Kenneth Britre and my topic is about Jeremy Bentham. He is an English philosopher and was born on February 15, 1748 in Houndsditch, London and died in June 6, 1832. Bentham famously held that humans were ruled by two sovereign masters, the pleasure and pain. He also viewed liberty and autonomy as good, but good instrumentally, not intrinsically. Thus, any action deemed wrong due to a violation of autonomy is derivatively wrong on instrumental ground as well. And on Benham's view, the law is not monolithic and immutable, since effects of a given policy may change, the moral quality of the policy may change as well.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, classmates. I'm John Dion Santiago and here to report all about John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill was a follower of Bentham, and through most of his life greatly admired Bentham's work, even though he disagreed with some of Bentham's claims, particularly on the nature of happiness. There are some pleasures that are more fitting than others. Intellectual pleasures are some pleasures that are fitting than others. Intellectual pleasures are of a higher, better sort than the ones that merely sensual and that we share with animals. According to Mill, intellectual pleasures has the highest value of pleasure, unlike with the physical pleasure that we share with animals like eating, playing, or sleeping. Example of intellectual pleasures is when you get an excitement when you are reading a novel, or a doctor that discovers a cure to a certain disease. In Mill's version of utilitarianism, we are a social being, meaning that the decisions we make will benefit the majority as much as possible, no matter what the sanctions might be. Here in utilitarianism, when deciding, one will deliberate upon what is right before taking it into action. Will the result of his or her action will be right or wrong? Like Bentham, Mill sought to use utilitarianism to inform law and social policy. The aim of increasing happiness underlies his arguments for women's suffrage and free speech. We can be said to have certain rights then, but those rights are underwritten by utility. If one can show that a purported right of duty is harmful, then one has shown that it's not genuine. Utilitarianism sought to protect everyone. For Mill, these rights exist because it is necessary for the happiness or the pleasure of all the people. Utilitarians support equality by the equal consideration of interest, and they reject any arbitrary decisions as to who is worthy of concern and who is not, and any discrimination between individuals. In Mill's view, everyone's happiness is equal. We are trying to achieve the happiness of everyone, not just by ourselves. Utilitarians believes that the purpose of morality is to make life better by increasing the amount of good things, such as pleasure and happiness, in the world and decreasing between of bad things, such as pain and unhappiness. They reject moral codes or systems that consist of commands or taboos that are based on customs, traditions, or orders given by leaders or supernatural beings. Instead, utilitarians think that what makes a morality be true or justifiable is its positive contribution to humans, and perhaps non-human beings. Mill believes that the goal of our action is promote greatest possible happiness or pleasure. Individual actions can be right or wrong based on if the action is promoting happiness or pain. The action will be right if it produces maximum pleasure or happiness over pain. Utilitarianism simply requires us to make decisions that decreases bad things.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I'm Allen Emerson Blanque, and I will be reporting utilitarian philosophy. So, utilitarianism is a philosophical view or theory about how we should evaluate a wide range of things that involves choices that people face. Among the things that can be evaluated are actions, law, policies, character traits, and moral codes. Utilitarianism is a form of consequentialism because it is the rest on the idea that is the consequences of result of actions, law, policies, etc. that determine whether they are good or bad, right or wrong. In general, whatever is being evaluated, we ought that choose the one that will produce the best overall results. In the language of utilitarians, we should choose the option that will produce the best overall results. In the language of utilitarians, we should choose the option that maximizes utility, that action or policy that produce the largest amount of good. Utilitarianism is generally held to be the view that the morally right action is the action that produces the best. There are many ways to spell out this general claim. One thing to note that is the theory is a form of consequentialism. The right action is understood entirely in terms of consequences produced. Utilitarianism is the idea that the moral worth of an action is solely determined by its contribution to overall utility in maximizing happiness or pleasure as some among all people. It is the total utility of individuals, which is important here, the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Utility, after which the doctrine is named, is a measure of in economics of the relative satisfaction from or desirability of the consumption of goods. Utilitarianism can be described as a quantitative and reductionist approach to ethics. Utilitarianism starts from the basis that pleasure and happiness are intrinsically valuable, that pain and suffering are intrinsically disvaluable, and that anything else has value in its causing happiness or preventing suffering or as meant to an end. This focus on happiness or pleasure as ultimate end or moral decisions make it make it a type of hedonism, and it is something known as hedonistic utilitarianism. Utilitarian supports
equality by the equal consideration of interest, and they reject any arbitrary distinction as to who is worthy of concern and who is not, in any discrimination between individuals. However, it does accept the idea of declining marginal utility, which recognizes that the same thing furthers the interests of a well-off individuals to a lesser degree that it would the, de- the interests of a less well-off individual to a lesser degree than it would the interests of a less well-off individual. Utilitarians believe that the purpose of morality is to make life better by increasing the amount of good things such as pleasure and happiness in the world, and decreasing the amount of bad things such as pain and unhappiness. They reject moral codes or systems that consist commands or taboos that are based on customs, traditions, or given by the leader or supernatural beings. Instead, utilitarians think that what makes morality be a true or justifiable is its positive contribution to human and perhaps non-human beings. Since the early 20th century, utilitarianism has undergone a variety of refinements. After the middle of the 20th century, it has become more common to identify as a consequentialist since very philosophers agree entirely with the view proposed by the classical utilitarians, particularly with respect to the hedonist value theory. But the influence of the classical utilitarians, particularly with respect to the profound, not only within the moral philosophy, but within political philosophy and social policy. The question Bentham asks, what use it, is a cornerstone of policy formation. It is a completely secular, forward-looking question. The articulation and systematic development of this approach to policy formation is owed to the classical utilitarians. And that's all. Thank you.